And welcome to the ETF Edge portion of Halftime Report. I'm Bob Pisani. It's getting down to decision time on a Bitcoin ETF, finally. Let's talk to a couple of people who have applications in front of the SEC. Jan Van Eck is the CEO of Van Eck, joined by Todd Rosenbluth, Director of ETF and Mutual Fund Research at CFRA. Todd, we don't have a Bitcoin ETF, at least not yet, but we are getting a raft of Bitcoin-related ETFs built around the crypto space, companies that are investing in. We did see Invesco file last week for two ETFs that own crypto-related companies and even Bitcoin indirectly. How is the ETF industry sort of responding to the dearth of a Bitcoin ETF? They seem to be trying to get their arms around it in an indirect way.
That's right. An indirect way has been the way the SEC has approved these products. So we've seen, as you mentioned, Invesco launched two products last week, SATO being one of them. We've got Global X with a blockchain-related ETF. We've got Bitwise within the ETF that owns these equities like Coinbase, like MicroStrategy, and of course Amplify has the largest of these products, BLOK. Block is the ticker on this. They're all giving exposure to the companies that are exposed to Bitcoin and the miners and other related blockchain companies, but they can't own that much of Bitcoin directly.
Yeah, so Todd, there's more than a dozen applicants for a Bitcoin ETF. SEC Chair Gary Gensler has signaled his support for a Bitcoin futures ETF, but he seems cold to a pure Bitcoin ETF without some clear regulatory control over the entities. He's complained he doesn't have control over Bitcoin exchanges. How is this going to play out? Handicap this for us. Are we going to see a Bitcoin ETF? Are we going to see Bitcoin futures? They're hitting a deadline this month with some of these Bitcoin futures ETFs. They're going to have to give a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Right, or they could actually delay it and punt this further down the road. So we think we're more likely to see a Bitcoin futures ETF first. That's what Gensler seems more comfortable, and the SEC has welcomed those applications. It's a timing issue. Does it happen in 2021, or does it move to 2022? So all of these products that could meet the deadline, could meet the goals, actually are approved and can launch at the same time instead of getting a first mover advantage. That's something we're watching.
Yeah, so Jan Van Eck, let me turn to you. You've got an application for a Bitcoin ETF and a Bitcoin futures ETF in front of the SEC right now. Can you handicap this for us? It seems like they're going to have to rule on a Bitcoin futures ETF. You've got one in front of you. Are you expecting something before the end of the month?
Todd's right. They actually can delay the futures, but there is one hard deadline, which is for our Bitcoin physical 19B4 filing, and the date on that is November 14th. So between right now and November 14th, we'll know what the SEC thinks about physical Bitcoin ETFs, and I'm not sure we'll know before then. But that is a hard deadline. That's our last deadline for our physical application.
I'm wondering how you get around this problem. Gensler, the head of the SEC, Gary Gensler, seems to imply that he doesn't want to act without clear regulatory control over the system, but like Bitcoin exchanges, but he doesn't have clear regulatory control. Is it going to take an act of Congress, or is he simply going to have to declare that he has control over certain parts of the crypto universe right now? I'm confused about how this could play out because there doesn't seem to be any action on the regulatory front.
I would say that I actually think I'm always glass half full on these things, but I think he achieved de facto regulatory control over Coinbase when he told them to stop doing a lending product a couple of weeks ago, and they actually stopped. And by requiring them to have a broker-dealer and a futures license, maybe he's accomplished what he's wanted to, which is de facto regulatory control over the so-called crypto exchanges.
Yeah, it seems like Congress is pretty distracted right now with a lot of other issues, including the budget and getting through Biden's agenda right now. So I think a power grab is probably the likely situation that's going to happen. Thank you very much, Jan and Todd. Much more on the prospects for a Bitcoin ETF coming up on ETF Edge, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, plus a record number of ETF launches this year, a record. We'll bring you up to date on a new raft of ESG-related products that have just come out. They keep coming. ETFedge.cnbc.com.